Hello and thank you for being here at Infidelity Tales Lab. Your presence makes sharing these stories worthwhile. Tell us, where are you tuning in from today? Big city? Small town? Share with us in the comments. Now let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. A Life Built on Lies. Mark Thompson's fingers tightened around his leather briefcase as he approached the front door of his suburban home. The faint scent of jasmine wafted through the evening air, Victoria's signature perfume. She always made sure their house smelled like a luxury boutique, just like everything else in their carefully curated life. He paused at the entrance, straightening his Italian silk tie. The day's frustrations still lingered from a particularly challenging client meeting, but he'd learned long ago to mask such trivial concerns. Success demanded perfection, both in appearance and demeanor. The door opened before he could reach for his keys. Victoria stood in the doorway, her blonde hair styled in elegant waves, wearing a navy cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Welcome home, darling." She leaned in to kiss his cheek, her lips barely grazing his skin. "I have a surprise for you." Mark stepped into their foyer, noting how Victoria's heels clicked against the marble tiles, an unnecessary formality for a weekday evening at home. A surprise? She disappeared into their wine cellar, returning moments later with a bottle of Chateau Lafite, Rothschild, 1982. "I thought we could start celebrating our anniversary a bit early this year." Her perfectly manicured fingers caressed the bottle's label. "I remember how much you loved this vintage at the Hendersons' party." Mark set his briefcase down, studying his wife's expression. 15 years in finance had taught him to read people's tells, and Victoria's smile held a hint of tension at the corners. "That's quite thoughtful of you. Though our anniversary isn't for another 2 weeks, can a wife spoil her husband?" Victoria moved to the kitchen, her movements precise and deliberate as she retrieved the wine opener. "You worked so hard, Mark. You deserve something special." He loosened his tie, watching as she struggled slightly with the cork, unusual for someone who entertained as frequently as Victoria did. "How was your day?" "Oh, lunch with Amanda, then some shopping." The cork came free with a pop that seemed to echo through the kitchen. "I found the most gorgeous Hermes scarf. The boutique just got their new collection." Mark accepted the glass she offered, noting how her hand trembled slightly. "Amanda mentioned she was in Phoenix this week for her sister's wedding." Victoria's pause was nearly imperceptible as she poured her own glass. "Did I say Amanda? I meant Margaret. You know how I sometimes mix up the girls from the club." Mark took a measured sip of the wine, savoring its complexity while his mind cataloged the inconsistency. "Of course. Easy mistake to make." They moved to the living room, settling into their usual evening routine. Victoria perched on the edge of the leather sofa, phone close at hand, while Mark reviewed the day's financial reports on his tablet. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the soft chimes of Victoria's incoming messages. "I need to review the monthly statements," Mark announced, standing up. "The Anderson account has been showing some irregularities." Victoria's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering against the coffee table. "Can't that wait until tomorrow? We hardly spend any evenings together anymore. It'll only take a moment." He headed to his study, noting how Victoria's eyes followed his movement, her fingers drumming against the arm of the sofa. In his study, Mark logged into their joint account, scrolling through the recent transactions. There was a pattern of withdrawals, each just under $10,000, spread across the past 3 months. His jaw tightened as he noted the dates, each corresponding to Victoria's supposed spa days and shopping trips. He returned to the living room, where Victoria had already poured herself another glass of wine. "Darling, I noticed some unusual transactions in our account. Rather substantial withdrawals." Victoria's laugh tinkled like crystal. "Oh, that? You know how it is with the spa packages I've been trying. Stress relief doesn't come cheap these days." She stood, moving closer to him. "I should have mentioned it, but I didn't want to bother you with such trivial expenses." Mark nodded slowly, his expression neutral even as his mind began constructing a mental ledger of inconsistencies. "No bother at all. Though next time, perhaps we should discuss any withdrawals over 5 figures." "Of course, darling." Victoria pressed against him, her perfume almost cloying now. "You work so hard for us. I should be more considerate." The doorbell interrupted their conversation. Victoria stiffened, then quickly composed herself. That must be the new cleaning service. I'll handle it. Mark watched her hurry to the door, noting how she closed it partially behind her as she spoke to whoever was outside. Her voice was hushed, urgent, though he couldn't make out the words. When she returned, her cheeks were flushed. Wrong address. Some people really should learn to use GPS properly. Mark smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Indeed, they should. Later that night, as Victoria slept, Mark sat in his study reviewing security camera footage from their driveway. Cameras Victoria didn't know he'd installed months ago after noticing several mysterious scratches on her car. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m., and there it was, a man in an expensive suit, speaking closely with Victoria at their door. The image quality was excellent, capturing every detail of their interaction, including the envelope she pressed into his hands. Mark paused the footage, zooming in on the man's face. He'd seen him before, at charity events and real estate functions. Christopher Hayes. The name surfaced in his memory, along with rumors of gambling debts and desperate women left in his wake. His hand clenched around his phone as he pulled up his contact list. Sarah Mitchell's number, saved under tax consultant, glowed on the screen. The former detective had proved invaluable during several corporate investigations. Now she would serve a more personal purpose. The message was brief. Need comprehensive surveillance. Target, Victoria Thompson. Starting immediately. Discretion essential. Double your usual rate. Her response came within minutes, understood. We'll begin tomorrow. Details secure. Mark closed his laptop, his mind already mapping out contingencies and strategies. Victoria had chosen her path, destroying 15 years of trust with each lie that passed her perfectly painted lips. She would learn, as others had before her, that betraying Mark Thompson carried consequences far beyond her worst nightmares. He moved through their dark house to their bedroom, where Victoria slept peacefully, unaware of the machinery already in motion. The expensive wine bottle sat empty on her nightstand, her attempted distraction now serving as evidence of her guilt. Mark slipped into bed, maintaining the careful distance that had grown between them over recent months. In the darkness, he allowed himself a small, cold smile. Victoria thought she was playing a clever game, but she'd soon discover she was merely a pawn in a much larger match. The next morning, Mark maintained their normal routine. He kissed Victoria goodbye, complimented her new dress, and headed to the office as usual. But as he drove away, his phone buzzed with Sarah's first update, surveillance in place. Target leaving residence. Will update hourly. The game had begun, and Mark Thompson never played to lose. Chapter 2. The Web Widens. The autumn sun painted Maggie Wilson's garden in soft light as she peered through her designer binoculars, tracking Victoria Thompson's Mercedes as it pulled out of the driveway. This marked the third time this week Victoria had left unusually early, dressed in outfits far too sophisticated for simple errands. Maggie reached for her phone, scrolling to Mark Thompson's private number, the one he'd given her in case of emergencies at last year's neighborhood watch meeting. Her fingers hesitated over the keypad as she considered the implications of what she'd witnessed over the past months. Mr. Thompson? It's Margaret Wilson. She kept her voice low, though she lived alone. I believe there's something you should know about Victoria. Mark's voice came through, cool and controlled. Mrs. Wilson, I trust this is important. I've seen her, Mr. Thompson, at Café Laurent multiple times with that real estate agent, the one who drives the black Maserati. They seem quite familiar with each other. A pause, then. How familiar, exactly? Let's just say I wouldn't want my husband meeting anyone that way. Maggie adjusted her glasses. They're there now, actually. He's wearing one of those Italian suits he's known for. Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Your discretion in this matter will be remembered. The line went dead, leaving Maggie with a mixture of satisfaction and unease. Across town, in his corner office, Mark set down his phone and turned to David Shun, who sat across from his desk reviewing quarterly reports. His friend and business partner had been uncharacteristically quiet all morning. Something on your mind, David? David placed the reports on Mark's desk, his expression troubled. We need to talk about Victoria. Mark's eyes narrowed slightly. Go on. There are rumors, Mark, about her being seen with Christopher Hayes. David leaned forward, lowering his voice. You know his reputation. The gambling, the women, the fraudulent property deals. I'm aware of Mr. Hayes' reputation. Mark's voice remained steady, betraying nothing of his growing rage. What exactly have you heard? He's been spotted with her at private showings of luxury properties. Properties, I might add, that are suspiciously close to some of our commercial development sites. David pulled out his phone, showing Mark several photos. These were taken by our security team last week. They thought it was relevant to our interests. The images showed Victoria and Christopher entering a high-rise downtown, her hand resting intimately on his arm as they passed through the lobby. The timestamp matched one of her supposed spa appointments. I appreciate your bringing this to my attention. Mark's fingers drummed once on his desk, the only outward sign of his tension. Have our security team forward all relevant footage to my private server. And David? Not a word of this to anyone. Of course. David stood, hesitating. Mark, if you need anything, what I need is information. Mark turned to his computer, dismissing his friend with practiced efficiency. Once alone, he opened his secure email, finding Sarah Mitchell's latest report waiting in his inbox. The surveillance photos were comprehensive. Victoria and Christopher at various locations throughout the city, including several banks. The most recent set showed them leaving an underground parking garage, Victoria clutching a large envelope. Mark's phone buzzed, a text from Victoria, "Working late tonight, darling. Don't wait up." His response was immediate and casual. Of course. Don't work too hard. He switched to Sarah's number. Need complete background on Christopher Hayes. Financial records, property holdings, known associates. Everything. The detective's reply came quickly. Already on it. Preliminary findings concerning. Multiple aliases, offshore accounts. Want me to dig deeper? Whatever it takes. Budget unlimited. Mark opened his bottom drawer, removing a thick folder labeled Contingency Plans. Inside, detailed documentation of their assets, accounts, and properties filled page after page. He'd maintained these records meticulously throughout their marriage, preparing for possibilities he'd hoped would never materialize. A knock at his door interrupted his review. Rachel Kim, his administrative assistant, entered with a stack of papers. "Sir, the Anderson contract needs your signature." She paused, noting the unusual documents on his desk. "Is everything all right?" Mark had always appreciated Rachel's attention to detail and unwavering loyalty. "Rachel, I need you to handle something confidential. Can you access Victoria's email accounts? The ones she used to coordinate the charity events?" "Yes, I still have administrative access." "Monitor them. Forward anything involving Christopher Hayes or property investments directly to me. Maintain absolute discretion." Rachel's expression remained professional, though her eyes showed understanding. "Of course, Mr. Thompson. Will there be anything else?" "Yes. Schedule a meeting with Michael Rodriguez for tomorrow morning. Tell him it's regarding asset protection." After Rachel left, Mark returned to the surveillance photos, studying each one. Victoria's carelessness surprised him. Meeting Christopher in public, using their joint accounts, leaving such an obvious trail. She'd clearly underestimated him, a mistake many had made before her. His computer chimed with an email notification from Thomas Bennett, their private banker. The subject line read, "Urgent, unusual account activity." Mark opened the message, reading Thomas's carefully worded concerns about recent transactions. The banker had noticed a pattern of large withdrawals, each structured to avoid automatic reporting requirements. The timing corresponded perfectly with Victoria's meetings with Christopher. "Mr. Bennett," Mark typed, "I believe we should discuss these transactions in person. Lunch tomorrow at the Capitol Grill?" "My treat." The response was immediate. "Of course, Mr. Thompson." "The usual table at 1 p.m.? Mark confirmed the appointment, then turned back to his contingency plans. Victoria had chosen to align herself with a man known for destroying lives through gambling and manipulation. She would soon learn that compared to her husband's capacity for calculated retribution, Christopher Hayes was merely an amateur. The sun had set by the time Mark left his office, the city lights creating patterns on his desk. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Victoria, followed by a text claiming she'd be staying at her sister Emily's house due to a family emergency. He typed out a response expressing concern, knowing Emily was actually at a medical conference in Boston. Information Victoria would have known if she'd bothered to maintain real contact with her family instead of using them as convenient alibis. The drive home took him past Café Laurent, where Maggie Wilson had spotted Victoria earlier. He noticed Christopher's Maserati still parked in the back lot, its sleek form illuminated by security lights. Mark pulled into a nearby space, killing the engine. Within minutes, Sarah Mitchell's car appeared, taking position across the street. Her text was brief, in place. "We'll follow target." He waited, watching as Victoria emerged from the cafe's side entrance, followed shortly by Christopher. Their embrace in the darkness would have been hidden from most observers, but Mark's position offered a perfect view. He recorded everything on his phone, adding to his growing collection of evidence. As Victoria's Mercedes pulled away, followed discreetly by Sarah, Mark remained in his car, reviewing his next moves. The pieces were in place, surveillance established, financial records secured, allies positioned. Victoria thought she was orchestrating a simple affair, but she'd stumbled into a game of strategy she couldn't hope to win. His phone lit up with a final update from Sarah. "Target heading home. Full report in your inbox by morning." Mark started his car, a cold smile playing at his lips. The coming weeks would teach Victoria and Christopher the true meaning of consequences. They'd learn why his business competitors feared him, why no one who'd ever crossed him had emerged unscathed. The game was entering its next phase, and Mark Thompson was playing for keeps. Chapter 3. The Gathering Storm. Sarah Mitchell sat in her unmarked car, adjusting her camera's telephoto lens as she documented Victoria Thompson's latest rendezvous with Christopher Hayes. The midday sun bounced off the windows of the luxury apartment building where they'd been meeting regularly for the past week. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Status update?" Sarah snapped several more photos before responding. Target entered Hayes' apartment at 11:30 a.m., carrying large envelope, manila, possibly containing documents or cash. Duration? Still inside. This is the longest visit yet. Sarah checked her watch. Going on 3 hours now. Mark's response was immediate. "Document everything. I want full surveillance coverage." Sarah shifted in her seat, her years of police work having taught her the value of patience. Through her lens, she caught movement at one of the apartment's windows. Christopher Hayes pacing, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing animatedly. His designer suit jacket lay discarded on a visible chair, his usual polished appearance showing signs of strain. Her phone rang. Mark's private line. "Got something interesting for you, boss," she said before he could speak. Hayes appears to be having quite the animated discussion. "Want me to try for audio?" "No need. I have other sources inside the building." Mark's voice held its usual controlled tone. "What's your assessment of their behavior patterns?" "They're getting sloppy, taking fewer precautions. Either they think they're untouchable, or something's making them desperate." Sarah zoomed in as Christopher appeared at the window again. "He's definitely agitated today. Classic signs of someone under pressure." "Good. Pressure makes people careless." A pause. "Stay on them. I want to know the moment Victoria leaves." The call ended, and Sarah settled back into her surveillance routine. An hour later, Victoria emerged from the building, her usual graceful composure noticeably shaken. She nearly dropped her car keys twice before managing to unlock her Mercedes. Sarah's camera captured every detail. Victoria's smeared lipstick, her hastily straightened clothing, the slight tremor in her hands as she started her car. Something had definitely changed in the dynamic between them. Target departing, Sarah texted Mark. Heading east on Marshall Avenue. Signs of emotional distress evident. Follow her. Document any stops. Victoria's Mercedes weaved through traffic with uncharacteristic recklessness, finally pulling into the parking lot of an upscale bar, one known for its discreet service and private booths. Sarah parked across the street, maintaining visual contact as Victoria made her way inside. Through the bar's front window, Sarah watched as Victoria ordered what appeared to be a double scotch, drinking it quickly before signaling for another. Her phone lay on the bar, and she checked it compulsively between drinks. Target at Griffin's bar, Sarah reported. Drinking alone. Unusual behavior for her profile. Mark's response came an hour later, Enough surveillance for today. I have what I need. Report to my office tomorrow, 7 a.m. Sarah packed up her equipment, but not before taking a final set of photos showing Victoria stumbling slightly as she left the bar, climbing into a taxi rather than driving her own car. The Mercedes remained in the parking lot, another deviation from her normally meticulous habits. The next morning, Sarah arrived at Mark's office precisely at 7 a.m., carrying a thick folder of surveillance photos and reports. She found him already at his desk, looking as if he hadn't slept. "Give me the highlights," he said, not looking up from his computer. "They're getting careless," Sarah began, laying out a series of photos. Meeting in public places, using her regular phone for contact, taking less care to hide their movements. Classic signs of either growing confidence or mounting pressure. In your professional opinion? Pressure. Sarah pointed to photos from the previous day. Hayes's body language shows increasing agitation. Your wife's behavior suggests mounting stress. They're not acting like people in control of the situation. Mark nodded slowly, examining each photo. What about the gambling connection? Confirmed. I tracked Hayes to 3 different underground casinos in the past week alone. He's dropping serious money, way more than a real estate agent should have access to. Sarah pulled out another photo, this one showing Christopher at a high-stakes poker table. He's in deep with some dangerous people. And Victoria? No direct gambling activity observed, but she's been making regular withdrawals from multiple banks. Always just under-reporting thresholds. Classic structuring behavior. Mark's expression remained neutral, but his fingers tightened slightly on his desk. "You've done excellent work, Sarah. I'll need you to continue the surveillance, but with a new focus. I want everything you can get on Hayes's gambling contacts. Names, locations, amounts. That could get complicated," Sarah warned. "These aren't exactly legitimate establishments. Double your usual rate, plus hazard pay." Mark finally looked up, his eyes cold. "I want to know exactly who he's indebted to." After Sarah left, Mark pulled up the latest report from his banking contact. The numbers told a clear story. Victoria had withdrawn over $200,000 in the past month alone, all in carefully structured transactions designed to avoid detection. His phone buzzed, Victoria's morning check-in. "Having lunch with the charity committee today. Don't wait up." Mark allowed himself a small, cold smile as he typed his response. "Enjoy your lunch, dear. Give my best to the committee." He turned back to his computer, pulling up the GPS tracking data from Victoria's phone. The dot moved steadily toward Christopher's apartment building, nowhere near the charity committee's usual meeting place. A knock at his door interrupted his monitoring. David entered, looking concerned. "Mark, we need to talk. The Anderson account is showing some serious irregularities." "Close the door." David complied, taking a seat across from Mark's desk. "I've been reviewing the numbers. Someone's been accessing our investment data, specifically the properties near Hayes's development projects." "Victoria's login credentials?" "Yes, but the access pattern suggests someone else is using them. The queries are too technical, too focused on specific financial details." Mark leaned back in his chair, pieces falling into place. "Hayes is using her access to gather intel on our investments." "It gets worse," David continued. "Some of our confidential development plans have been downloaded. Plans for properties that just happened to neighbor Hayes's recent acquisitions." "Perfect." Mark's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Have IT continue monitoring the access, but don't restrict it. Let them think they're being clever." As David left, Mark's phone lit up with a message from Sarah. Target meeting with Hayes confirmed. Entering his building now. Mark checked the time. Barely noon. Victoria's lies were becoming more frequent, more careless. Soon, she would make a critical mistake, and he would be ready. He opened his desk drawer, removing a small recording device. The conversation he'd had with Christopher the previous week had been illuminating, especially the part where Hayes had smugly declared, "Your success is ours to claim." Mark plugged the device into his computer, adding the recording to his growing file of evidence. Victoria and Christopher thought they were playing a sophisticated game, but they'd soon learn they were merely pawns in a much larger strategy. His phone buzzed again. Another update from Sarah. Hayes making calls to known gambling contacts. Signs of increasing desperation. Want me to move closer? Maintain distance. Record everything. Mark's fingers moved swiftly over his keyboard, documenting each new piece of intelligence in his meticulously organized files. The net was closing, and neither Victoria nor Christopher had any idea how thoroughly he'd mapped their every move. In his study that evening, surrounded by surveillance photos and financial records, Mark allowed himself to feel the full weight of Victoria's betrayal. 15 years of marriage, reduced to a series of lies and secret meetings. But unlike the countless others who'd underestimated him throughout his career, Victoria should have known better. She'd seen what happened to those who crossed him in business. Now she would learn what happened to those who betrayed him personally. Mark closed his laptop, the pieces of his revenge falling into place. Victoria and Christopher's game was approaching its final moves, though they didn't know it yet. Soon, they would understand exactly who they were dealing with, and by then, it would be far too late to escape the consequences of their choices. Chapter 4: The Counterattack. Mark Thompson stood at the entrance of his newly renovated dining room, surveying the assembled guests with calculated satisfaction. The crystal glasses sparkled under designer lighting, each place setting arranged to perfection. Victoria's usual seat at the head of the table remained conspicuously empty. "Mark, darling, this is absolutely magnificent," Amanda Collins gushed, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she gestured toward the elaborate centerpiece. "Though I must say, we've missed Victoria at the last few gatherings. My wife appears to have other commitments these days," Mark replied, his tone measured as he guided Amanda to her seat. "Though I'm sure she'd be fascinated to hear about tonight's discussion." David Chin caught Mark's eye from across the table, understanding the subtle play at work. This dinner party represented more than mere social obligation. It was the first move in Mark's systematic dismantling of Victoria's carefully constructed social world. Speaking of commitments, Amanda leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I heard the most interesting rumor about Victoria's new business venture. Something about interior design?" Mark's lips curved into a razor-thin smile. "Indeed. Perhaps you'd be interested in hearing about some of her recent projects?" He pulled out his phone, displaying a series of photos Sarah Mitchell had provided. Images of Victoria entering various properties with Christopher Hayes, their professional facade betrayed by intimate gestures caught on camera. Amanda's eyes widened. "Isn't that the real estate agent who recently made headlines for his gambling debts?" "The very same." Mark's voice remained pleasant, though his eyes held a predatory gleam. "I'd hate to think any of our friends might be considering her services without knowing the full context of her business partnerships." The information spread through the dinner party like poison in a wine glass. Mark watched as phones discreetly emerged beneath the table, text messages flying between manicured fingers. By dessert, half of Victoria's potential clients would be politely withdrawing their interest. In his office the next morning, Mark reviewed Sarah's latest surveillance report. Victoria had spent 3 hours at her newly rented office space, attempting to salvage meetings with clients who had mysteriously canceled their consultations. "Sir?" Rachel appeared in his doorway, tablet in hand. "We've received responses from the anonymous tips about Mr. Hayes' business practices. Several regulatory bodies are expressing interest." "Excellent. Forward those to Michael Rodriguez. He'll know which agencies should receive what information." Mark turned to his computer, pulling up Victoria's business email account. "Any movement on those property deals?" 3 buyers have withdrawn their offers after receiving documentation about Mr. Hayes' gambling history. The 4th is demanding a complete audit before proceeding. Mark nodded, satisfaction evident in his posture. "And the offshore accounts?" "Our contact at the Financial Crimes Unit has flagged them for investigation. They're particularly interested in the pattern of transactions matching known money laundering techniques." The phone on Mark's desk buzzed, Victoria's number flashing on the screen. He let it ring through to voicemail, knowing she would be calling about their frozen joint account. The bank's compliance department had raised concerns about suspicious transaction patterns, requiring a complete review before releasing any funds. "Rachel, I need you to compile a dossier on Hayes' previous victims. Focus on the women he's manipulated in similar schemes. Make sure it reaches Amanda Collins by this afternoon." "Already done, sir." Mrs. Collins seemed quite eager to share the information with her social media followers. Rachel's efficiency had proven invaluable in executing Mark's plans. Though I should mention, Victoria has been trying to access the company's servers using her old passwords. Let her in? Mark's expression darkened with satisfaction. I want to see exactly what she's looking for. Later that afternoon, Mark sat in Thomas Bennett's office at the bank, reviewing the latest transaction reports. The private banker shifted uncomfortably in his seat, aware of his role in enabling Victoria's financial manipulations. Mr. Thompson, I want to assure you that under normal circumstances, these transactions would have triggered immediate notifications. Normal circumstances? Mark's voice carried a hint of steel. Tell me, Thomas, what made these circumstances abnormal? Mrs. Thompson was very convincing in her explanations. The withdrawals seemed legitimate, given your usual spending patterns. Thomas loosened his collar. She mentioned they were for property investments you had approved. I see. Mark placed a folder on the desk between them. And these documents, bearing what appears to be my signature, did they seem legitimate as well? Thomas blanched as he examined the papers. These authorizations? I assumed. You assumed wrong. Mark leaned forward. Now you have two options. You can cooperate fully with my investigation, providing detailed records of conversation with my wife and Mr. Hayes. Or you can explain to the Banking Commission why you failed to report multiple instances of suspicious activity. The banker's hands trembled as he reached for his computer keyboard. I'll have those records for you within the hour, Mr. Thompson. Mark's phone vibrated with a text from Sarah, target in distress. 3 more clients canceled this morning. She's heading to Hayes' apartment now. Perfect timing. Mark had ensured Victoria's professional humiliation would coincide with Christopher's own mounting pressures. The gambling debts Sarah had uncovered were just the beginning. Each of Hayes' corrupt business dealings would soon face scrutiny from various regulatory bodies. A knock at the bank office door interrupted his thoughts. Michael Rodriguez, his attorney, entered with a thick stack of documents. The restraining order has been filed, Michael announced without preamble, along with preliminary evidence of financial fraud. The judge was particularly interested in the forged signatures. And Hayes' response? His attorney reached out, suggesting a private meeting to discuss terms. Michael's disgust was evident. They seem to think this is a negotiation. Mark stood, straightening his tie. Schedule the meeting. I want to see Hayes' face when he realizes exactly what he's up against. The afternoon sun painted sharp angles across Mark's desk as he reviewed the latest surveillance photos. Victoria's composed facade had cracked, her designer outfits replaced by increasingly disheveled appearances. Christopher's polished charm had given way to obvious anxiety as his financial empire began to crumble. Sarah's report detailed their increasingly desperate meetings, now held in cheaper locations as Christopher's access to luxury spaces disappeared. The photos showed them arguing, Victoria's gestures becoming more frantic as Christopher's smooth assurances failed to materialize into solutions. Mark's intercom buzzed. Rachel's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Sir, Victoria's business line just received another cancellation. This time from the Hendersons. They specifically cited concerns about her professional associations. Send flowers to Amanda Collins. She's been particularly helpful in spreading the word. Mark turned back to his computer, watching the real-time tracking of Victoria's phone as she drove aimlessly through the city's expensive neighborhoods she could no longer access. His revenge was unfolding with precise coordination, each element designed to dismantle the comfortable life Victoria had taken for granted. She would learn, as others had before her, that crossing Mark Thompson meant losing everything: reputation, security, and social standing. The intercom buzzed again. Sir? Mr. Hayes is here for the meeting. Mark straightened his tie, a cold smile playing at his lips. Send him in. It's time he understood exactly who he's dealing with. Chapter 5. The Desperate Measures. Victoria's hands shook as she accessed her private cloud storage, scrolling through years of intimate photos and videos from her marriage to Mark. Her once immaculate apartment, rented after Mark's systematic lockout from their social circles, showed signs of her unraveling. Designer clothes strewn across furniture, empty wine bottles lined up on the kitchen counter. This will destroy him, she muttered, selecting particularly compromising images. His precious reputation won't survive this. Her phone buzzed, Christopher's name flashing on the screen. Did you get the photos? Her voice carried an edge of hysteria. Victoria, stop. Christopher's usual smooth tone had given way to barely controlled panic. He's 3 steps ahead of us. Those photos? They're all watermarked with metadata. If you release them, they'll trace directly back to you. That's impossible. These are private photos from my personal collection. Nothing about Mark Thompson is what it seems. The sound of ice clinking against glass carried through the phone. Christopher's drinking had increased notably since their plans began unraveling. He's got us cornered. The gambling den raid was just the beginning. Victoria paced her apartment, designer heels clicking against tile. What raid? You didn't mention any raid. Because I was in lockup when it happened. Christopher's voice rose sharply. Police hit my private game last night. Someone tipped them off about marked cards and counterfeit chips. Care to guess who that someone might be? The phone slipped from Victoria's fingers, clattering against the floor. She snatched it up, her voice dropping to a whisper. How much did they find? Enough to trigger a federal investigation. My accounts are frozen, Victoria. All of them. The ice clinked again, more urgently. Your husband, he's not just rich, he's ruthless. Do you understand? While we thought we were playing him, he was dismantling us piece by piece. Victoria's gaze fell on the newspaper lying on her coffee table. The business section featured a glowing profile of Mark's latest charitable foundation, accompanied by photos of him at a gala with Amanda Collins on his arm. The article made no mention of Victoria. We need cash, Christopher continued, desperation bleeding through his practiced charm. The Taiwanese investors are calling in their markers. They don't care about frozen accounts or legal problems. They want their money. I can't help you. Victoria's voice cracked. He's locked me out of everything. The joint accounts, the properties, even my business is toxic now. No one will work with me. Then get creative. Christopher's facade shattered completely. You lived with him for 15 years. There must be something we can use, something we can sell or leverage. Victoria's eyes darted to her laptop, where the property documents were displayed. The ones bearing Mark's forged signature, which she'd used to access funds for Christopher's gambling debts. Each transaction now felt like another nail in her coffin. A sharp knock at her door made her jump. Through the peephole, she saw 2 men in suits. Not the expensive kind Christopher wore, but the functional kind favored by federal agents. Mrs. Thompson? One of them called out. We're with the Financial Crimes Unit. We have some questions about certain property transactions. Victoria backed away from the door, her heart pounding. Christopher, she whispered into the phone. They're here. Who's there? Victoria? Don't you dare mention my name. The line went dead. She ran to her bedroom, grabbing her emergency bag, packed days ago when she first sensed Mark's noose tightening. The knocking grew more insistent. Mrs. Thompson, we can do this here or downtown. Your choice. Victoria's hand trembled as she texted her sister Emily. Need help. Emergency. Please. The response came quickly. You made your choices, Vic. I won't lie for you anymore. Tears blurred her vision as reality crashed down around her. Emily had been her last hope, the one person who might understand, might help. But Mark had gotten to her too, somehow turning even blood against blood. Her phone buzzed with an incoming email. The sender, Mark Thompson. Subject line, your next move? Victoria opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a single photo. Her meeting with Christopher at the bank, passing him an envelope full of cash. The timestamp matched perfectly with one of the suspicious transactions Thomas Bennett had facilitated. Below the photo, a message. The federal agents have copies of everything. Your choice. Cooperate now or explain later. The knocking had become pounding. Victoria stared at her phone, at the evidence of her own destruction, so perfectly orchestrated by the man she'd underestimated for too long. She thought back to the moment in their kitchen, weeks ago, when she demanded Mark's entire salary to cover Christopher's gambling debts. Your success is ours to claim, she declared, drunk on power and Chris's promises. Mark's response played back in her mind, his calm voice carrying hidden steel. I think he owes you more than money now. Check the accounts. She'd laughed then, believing herself clever, believing she and Christopher had outmaneuvered the calculating businessman she'd married. Now, as federal agents prepared to break down her door, she finally understood the depth of her miscalculation. Her phone buzzed one final time. Another message from Mark. They have questions about the forged signatures. I suggest you answer them truthfully. Christopher already has. Victoria sank onto her designer sofa, the fight draining from her body. Outside, the sounds of her door being breached barely registered. Mark had won, as he always did, destroying his opponents so completely they never recovered. As the agents entered, Victoria looked up, her expensive makeup streaked with tears. I'd like to make a statement, she said quietly, finally accepting the inevitable. About Christopher Hayes and certain financial transactions. Hours later, Mark sat in his study reviewing the preliminary report from the Financial Crimes Unit. Victoria's confession had been comprehensive, detailing each step of their scheme. Christopher, true to form, had crumbled under pressure, offering to testify against Victoria in exchange for leniency. Sarah's latest surveillance photos showed Christopher being escorted from his apartment by federal agents, his designer's suit wrinkled, his polished appearance shattered. Other photos captured Victoria's sister Emily hugging Mark at a charity event, their public reconciliation sending clear signals through their social circle about who held the moral high ground. Sir? Rachel appeared in the doorway. The press release is ready about the company's cooperation with federal authorities. And Mrs. Collins asked me to remind you about tonight's gala. Mark nodded, adjusting his tie as he stood. The next phase of his plan was already in motion. Victoria and Christopher had chosen their paths, believing they could outsmart him. Now they would face the consequences of that choice, their destruction serving as a reminder to others who might consider crossing Mark Thompson. Have the car brought around, he instructed Rachel. It's time to make an appearance. Chapter 6, The Breaking Point. The federal courthouse buzzed with anticipation as Mark Thompson sat in the front row, watching Victoria's confident facade crumble under the prosecution's relentless questioning. Her designer outfit, once a symbol of their shared success, now seemed like a costume, a desperate attempt to maintain appearances as her world collapsed. Mrs. Thompson, the prosecutor continued, displaying bank statements on the courtroom screens. Please explain these transactions to the jury. Victoria's hands clutched the witness stand. They were investments, property deals that Christopher, Mr. Hayes assured me, would provide significant returns. And did Mr. Thompson authorize these transactions? A pause. Victoria's gaze flickered to Mark, finding only cold calculation in his expression. I had authorization. You mean these authorizations? The prosecutor held up a stack of documents. The ones our forensic experts have confirmed contain forged signatures. In the gallery, Amanda Collins leaned forward, recording each moment of Victoria's downfall for their social circle's consumption. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from their shared acquaintances, each eager for updates on the public spectacle. Sarah Mitchell sat several rows back, her trained eye noting Victoria's subtle tells, the nervous adjustment of her hair, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she avoided looking at specific members of the audience. Years of surveillance had taught her to read people's breaking points. Your Honor, Victoria's attorney interjected. My client would like to revise her earlier statement. The judge peered over his glasses. Proceed, Mrs. Thompson. Victoria's composure cracked. The signatures, I forged them. Christopher said it was the only way to access the funds we needed. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Mark remained motionless, his expression unchanged as his wife confessed to multiple counts of fraud. The prosecutor pressed on. And these funds, where did they go? Christopher had gambling debts. Victoria's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He said if I didn't help him, he'd expose our relationship. He knew things about Mark's business, claimed he could ruin everything we'd built. Blackmail, Mrs. Thompson? Why didn't you report this to your husband or the authorities? Victoria laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the courtroom. Report it? I was as guilty as Christopher. I chose this. I convinced myself we were clever enough to outsmart Mark. The prosecutor displayed new evidence. Surveillance photos showing Victoria and Christopher at various banks, properties, and private meetings. Each image painted a damning picture of their conspiracy. During a brief recess, Mark stood in the courthouse corridor, reviewing messages from Rachel about the media coverage. The story had captured public attention, spreading through their social circles like wildfire. Mr. Thompson, Christopher Hayes' attorney approached, his expensive suit failing to mask his desperation. My client wishes to discuss a deal. Mark turned, fixing the lawyer with a cold stare. I don't make deals with thieves and manipulators. Mr. Hayes has information details about other investment schemes, names of involved parties. You mean the schemes we've already documented? The names we've already identified? Mark's voice carried a hint of amusement. Your client's attempts at manipulation are as transparent as they are pathetic. Back in the courtroom, Christopher took the stand. His usual charm had disappeared, replaced by barely concealed panic as he faced the evidence mounted against him. Mr. Hayes, the prosecutor began, please tell the jury about your gambling activities. Christopher straightened his tie, a nervous habit Mark had noted during their earlier confrontations. I may have had some outstanding debts. Some debts? According to these records, you lost over $2 million at illegal gambling establishments in the past year alone. Money that traces back to fraudulent transactions from the Thompsons' accounts. The evidence mounted. Surveillance photos, bank records, witness testimonies from other women Christopher had manipulated. Each piece had been meticulously collected and presented, forming an inescapable web of proof. During Christopher's testimony, Victoria sat at the defense table, her face pale as she listened to him detail their scheme. When he began shifting blame onto her, describing her as the mastermind behind the fraudulent transactions, she visibly flinched. The prosecution saved their most damaging evidence for last. Audio recordings of Christopher's conversations with various criminal contacts, discussing how he and Victoria planned to exploit Mark's wealth and business connections. Your Honor, Victoria's attorney stood again. My client wishes to change her plea. The judge nodded. Mrs. Thompson? Victoria rose, her designer outfit now wrinkled from hours in the courtroom. Guilty, Your Honor, to all charges. The gallery erupted in whispers. Amanda's fingers flew across her phone, spreading the news through their social network. Mark remained seated, his expression unchanged as he watched years of deception unravel before him. Christopher's reaction was immediate and predictable. If she's pleading guilty, I want to revise my statement. His attorney tried to silence him, but Christopher pressed on, desperation overriding judgment. I can provide more names, dates, details about other schemes. I have proof of bigger frauds. The judge called for order as Christopher continued his rapid descent into self-incrimination. Victoria stared straight ahead, tears streaking her expensive makeup as she listened to her former lover throw her under the bus to save himself. During the final statements, Mark received a message from Sarah. Target Hayes attempted to access offshore accounts. All frozen as planned. No escape routes left. The jury's deliberation was brief. Victoria and Christopher's guilty pleas simplified their task, leaving only the matter of sentencing recommendations. As the courtroom waited for the jury's return, Mark reviewed the latest reports from Rachel about the media coverage. The story had become a cautionary tale in their social circles. How the wife of a prominent businessman conspired with a gambling-addicted fraudster, only to be exposed and destroyed by her husband's calculated revenge. When the jury returned, Victoria stood to receive their decision, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Christopher, separated from her by his attorney, couldn't meet anyone's eyes as the formal recommendations were read. The judge's final words echoed through the courtroom. The evidence presented shows a calculated conspiracy to defraud not only Mr. Thompson, but numerous other victims. The court cannot ignore the premeditated nature of these crimes. As Victoria was led away by court officers, she turned to look at Mark one final time. He met her gaze with the same cold calculation that had characterized his systematic dismantling of their lives. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Mark. He delivered a brief, carefully prepared statement about cooperation with authorities and his commitment to preventing similar frauds in the future. Amanda joined him as he walked to his car, her social media updates having already shaped the narrative their circles would adopt. Mark, darling, you handled that magnificently. Mark straightened his tie, his expression revealing nothing of his inner thoughts. The destruction of Victoria and Christopher's lives wasn't just revenge. It was a message to anyone else who might consider crossing him. In business and in personal matters, Mark Thompson's retribution was absolute and inescapable. His phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. "Sir, the press release about the company's cooperation with federal authorities has gone viral. Your position as a victim who fought back is trending." Mark allowed himself a small smile as he entered his car. Victoria and Christopher had chosen their path, believing they could outsmart him. Their destruction would serve as a lasting reminder of the cost of such arrogance. "Take me back to the office," he instructed his driver. "There's still work to be done." Chapter 7. The New Beginning. Mark Thompson signed the final paperwork for his new penthouse with the same precision he'd used to destroy Victoria's life. The real estate agent, distinctly not associated with any of Christopher Hayes' former contacts, handed over the keys with nervous reverence. "The renovations have been completed to your specifications, Mr. Thompson," she said, maintaining a professional distance. His reputation for ruthless efficiency had spread far beyond business circles since the trial. Mark pocketed the keys, dismissing the agent with a nod. The penthouse represented more than just a change of address. It was the physical manifestation of his victory, a symbol of his transition from betrayed husband to renowned power broker. His phone buzzed with a message from David Chun. "Board meeting in 20. They're ready to announce your promotion." The elevator ride to his new home gave Mark time to appreciate how thoroughly he'd reconstructed his life in the wake of Victoria's betrayal. The company's stock had soared after the trial, his public image transforming from victim to victor in the media narrative he'd carefully crafted. Rachel met him in the lobby of their corporate headquarters, tablet in hand. "Sir, the press release about your promotion to senior vice president is ready. The board is particularly excited about your plans for international expansion." "And the other matter?" Mark adjusted his tie, a habit that now carried an air of authority rather than anxiety. "Your foundation's first fundraising gala has already sold out. Amanda Collins handled the guest list personally." Rachel's efficiency had earned her a significant promotion in the company's restructuring. Several prominent victims of financial fraud will be speaking about their experiences. The boardroom fell silent as Mark entered. These men and women had witnessed his methodical destruction of Victoria and Christopher's schemes, recognizing in him a level of strategic thinking that transcended mere revenge. "Mark," the CEO greeted him, gesturing to the head of the table, a position that until recently had been occupied by others. "I believe congratulations are in order." The promotion ceremony was brief, befitting Mark's style. No lengthy speeches or false modesty, just the clear acknowledgement of power shifting into capable hands. "I trust you'll handle our international expansion with the same thoroughness you've demonstrated recently," the CEO said, a knowing glint in his eye. "Thoroughness is essential in all endeavors," Mark replied, his voice carrying the same cold authority that had reduced Christopher Hayes to a babbling mess in court. After the meeting, David caught up with him in the corridor. "The transition team is ready whenever you are. Though I have to admit, some of them seem nervous about working directly under you." "Good." Mark's lips curved slightly. Fear breeds efficiency. They walked together to Mark's new corner office, a space designed to intimidate as much as impress. The view of the city stretched out before them, a concrete and glass empire that would soon extend globally under his guidance. "Have you seen this?" David handed over his tablet, displaying a news article about Victoria's first week in prison. The photo showed her in standard-issue clothing, a far cry from her designer wardrobe. Quite a change from her usual social circle. Mark set the tablet aside without comment. Victoria's fate held no more interest for him than any other conquered opponent. His focus had shifted to larger targets, greater achievements. Sarah Mitchell's number flashed on his phone. She transitioned from private investigator to head of corporate security under his reorganization. "Sir, the background checks on our international partners are complete. You'll want to see these findings. Send them to Rachel. She'll brief me this afternoon." Mark turned to the wall of screens displaying market data from across the globe. "And Sarah? Make sure our new partners understand the importance of transparency in all dealings." The implied threat wasn't lost on anyone who'd witnessed how he handled deception. That evening, Mark hosted a private dinner for his enhanced support network. Rachel, David, and Sarah sat around his new dining table, each now holding positions of significant power within his expanding empire. To new beginnings, David raised his glass, careful to avoid any mention of the past that had led them here. The others joined the toast, their loyalty cemented by both fear and respect. They'd watched Mark systematically dismantle those who betrayed him, learning valuable lessons about the price of disloyalty. The Foundation's first initiative launches next week, Rachel reported, sliding over a tablet displaying their public engagement strategy. We're focusing on education and prevention of financial fraud. The irony hasn't been lost on the media. Irony suggests humor, Mark replied, his voice carrying the same controlled power that had characterized his courtroom victory. This is strategy. Each victim we help, each fraud we prevent, reinforces our narrative while reminding others of the consequences of betrayal. Sarah nodded appreciatively. The psychological impact is significant. Your name now carries weight in circles far beyond our original scope. Speaking of weight, David interjected, the Asian markets are showing interesting potential for expansion. Several key players have expressed interest in partnerships, particularly after witnessing our recent corporate restructuring. Mark's phone lit up with a message from Amanda Collins. Darling, the club is abuzz with news of your promotion. When can I see your new place? His relationship with Amanda had evolved naturally, built on a foundation of mutual understanding and shared appreciation for power. Unlike Victoria's desperate social climbing, Amanda had proven herself a valuable ally in his rise to greater influence. Schedule a private dinner, he texted back. We should discuss the Foundation's next phase. Their courtship, if it could be called that, reflected his new approach to relationships. Calculated, controlled, and completely devoid of the vulnerabilities he'd eliminated from his life. Rachel cleared her throat softly. Sir, there's one other matter. Emily, Victoria's sister, has requested a meeting. She's been instrumental in several of our Foundation's initial cases. Mark considered the request. Emily's decision to stand with him against her sister had proven profitable for both parties. Her child's medical treatment was fully funded, and her public support had helped shape the narrative of his victory. Arrange it, he decided. The Foundation could benefit from her continued involvement. The evening wrapped up with discussions of future expansions, both corporate and philanthropic. Each plan, each strategy, built upon the reputation Mark had cemented through his handling of Victoria's betrayal. Later, alone in his penthouse, Mark reviewed the latest reports from his global operations. The view of the city at night reminded him of the path that had led here, from betrayed husband to feared corporate leader. His phone buzzed with another update about Victoria's prison sentence, but he dismissed it without reading. The past was useful only as a lesson to others, a warning about the fate of those who dared to cross him. A message from the board chairman appeared. The international partners are impressed by your reputation for handling difficult situations. They're eager to proceed. Mark's response was brief. Set up the meetings. It's time to expand. The city lights below his window reflected his new reality. A world where his name inspired fear and respect in equal measure, where betrayal was met with destruction, and where power flowed to those strong enough to wield it without mercy. His transformation from wealthy businessman to ruthless power broker was complete, built on the ashes of those who'd underestimated him. Victoria and Christopher's destruction had merely been the foundation for his true ascension. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for expansion. Mark Thompson was ready, his capacity for calculated retribution now legendary in both business and social circles. He raised his glass to the city below, a private toast to the power of consequence, to the price of betrayal, and to the fear his name now carried in whispered conversations across boardrooms and social clubs alike. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. Victoria Thompson sat in her mandatory rehabilitation session, her prison uniform a stark contrast to the designer clothes that once defined her existence. The therapist across from her scribbled notes as Victoria recounted her latest attempt at processing her actions. I write him letters, Victoria admitted, her manicured nails now plain and short. Mark never responds, but the counselor says it's part of accepting responsibility. Dr. Hansen, her court-appointed therapist, looked up from her notepad. And do you accept responsibility, Victoria? I do now. She twisted her hands in her lap. When I look back, I see how arrogant we were. Christopher and I thought we could outsmart Mark. We never understood what we were dealing with. In another part of the city, Christopher Hayes paced his minimum security cell, his usual charm deteriorating under the harsh reality of incarceration. His cellmate, a former accountant convicted of embezzlement, watched him with growing irritation. Hayes, sit down. Your fancy footwork won't change anything. Christopher ran his hands through his unkempt hair. You don't understand. Thompson's not done with us. This prison sentence? It's just the beginning. The guy won, didn't he? Got his revenge, took his money back, threw you both in here. What more could he want? Christopher laughed, a hollow sound. You don't know Mark Thompson. Winning isn't enough for him. He doesn't just beat his opponents, he erases them. The prison intercom crackled. Hayes, visitor? In the visitation room, Christopher found himself face to face with one of his former gambling associates. The man's expensive suit and gold watch seemed designed to emphasize Christopher's fall from grace. The Taiwanese investors send their regards, the visitor said softly. They're quite interested in recovering their investment once you're released. Christopher's face paled. But my accounts? Thompson froze everything. That sounds like a you problem. The visitor stood, straightening his tie. They'll be waiting. Meanwhile, Mark's financial team worked through the complex process of recovering hidden assets. Sarah Mitchell's investigation had uncovered accounts and properties scattered across multiple jurisdictions. Sir, Rachel presented the latest findings in Mark's office. The forensic accountants have traced another series of transactions through the Cayman Islands. It appears Mr. Hayes was more thorough in hiding assets than we initially believed. Mark reviewed the documents with cold efficiency. Forward these to the federal investigators. Let's ensure their sentences aren't shortened for good behavior. Sarah added her own report. Victoria's been writing letters. Daily correspondence, all addressed to you. Destroy them. Mark didn't look up from his work. Her words are as worthless as her promises. Across town, Emily sat in a private room at St. Michael's Hospital, watching her child receive the treatment Mark's financial support had made possible. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother, Patricia. Did you visit your sister? Emily's response was brief, no. Some betrayals can't be undone. The message thread showed dozens of similar exchanges. Patricia's attempts to rebuild family bonds met with firm resistance. Emily had chosen her side, aligning herself with Mark's calculated strength over Victoria's manipulative weakness. In the prison's common area, Victoria encountered another inmate, a former victim of Christopher's schemes. The woman's recognition was immediate and hostile. Well, if it isn't Mrs. Thompson herself. Not so high and mighty now, are we? Victoria kept her head down, moving quickly past. The woman's words followed her. Your husband did us all a favor, exposing Hayes for what he really was. Shame you had to learn the hard way. Back in the financial district, Mark led a board meeting discussing the expansion of his foundation's work. The presentations included statistics on financial fraud prevention and support for victims of manipulation. Our latest initiative, Rachel explained to the board, focuses on identifying and preventing sophisticated fraud schemes. We've partnered with several financial institutions to develop early warning systems. A board member leaned forward. Isn't it rather ironic, given recent events? Mark's gaze silenced further commentary. There's no irony in turning personal experience into public benefit. Each prevented fraud, each exposed scheme, reinforces the consequences of betrayal. The Foundation's work had garnered national attention, with media outlets praising the transformation of personal tragedy into social good. What they didn't print was how each success story served as a reminder of Mark's power and the price of crossing him. Patricia Lewis sat alone in her recovery room, her mild heart attack a physical manifestation of the stress caused by her daughter's situation. A nurse brought in a flower arrangement, not from Victoria, whose prison status prevented such gestures, but from Mark. The card read simply, "Focus on your recovery. Everything else is handled." Those same words carried very different weight for Christopher, who received news that his appeal had been denied. His attorney delivered the update with poorly concealed frustration. They cited new evidence of additional fraud schemes. Somehow, they keep finding more accounts, more victims. Christopher slumped in his chair. Thompson, he's making sure we never get out. Mr. Hayes, given the mounting evidence, you should consider yourself lucky the sentences aren't consecutive. In her therapy session, Victoria worked through another mandatory exercise in accountability. Dr. Hansen pushed her to confront the reality of her choices. What would you say to Mark if he were here now? Victoria stared at her hands, the tan line from her removed wedding ring still visible. That he was right. About everything. About me, about Christopher, about how betrayal deserves no mercy. The therapist made a note. And do you believe you deserve mercy? What I believe doesn't matter. Victoria's voice carried the weight of her new understanding. Mark Thompson doesn't grant mercy to those who betray him. That's why he's Mark Thompson. Outside the prison walls, Mark's influence continued to grow. His foundation's work opened doors to international markets, his reputation for ruthless efficiency attracting partners who valued strength over sentiment. Rachel organized the latest financial reports, each page documenting the expanding empire built on the ashes of Victoria's betrayal. Sir, the media is requesting interviews about the foundation's success. Schedule them, Mark replied. The public should understand how betrayal creates opportunity for justice. In his cell, Christopher added another mark to his wall calendar, counting days until release. His cellmate watched the ritual with knowing eyes. You're not free when you leave here, Hayes. Thompson made sure of that. The debts, the ruined reputation, the destroyed relationships. That's your real prison. Christopher's response was barely audible, I know. He doesn't just win, he annihilates. The sun set on another day of rehabilitation programs, therapy sessions, and mandatory work details. Victoria composed her nightly letter to Mark, knowing it would never reach him. I understand now, she wrote. Not just what we did, but who you really are. They call you ruthless, but that's not accurate. You're justice without mercy, consequence without compromise. We thought we were players in a game, but you were the game itself. The letter joined the others in a growing pile, each one documenting her journey from defiance to understanding. Mark's victory wasn't just in their imprisonment. It was in the complete dismantling of their belief that they could outsmart him. As night fell, Mark stood in his penthouse office, reviewing reports of his expanding influence. Victoria's betrayal had taught him the value of absolute control, and he'd transformed that lesson into an empire built on fear and respect. His phone lit up with messages from international partners, each one eager to align themselves with his reputation for uncompromising strength. The game had changed, evolved beyond simple revenge into something larger. Mark Thompson had become more than a wronged husband seeking justice. He'd become a symbol of consequence, a reminder that betrayal carried a price too heavy for most to bear. Victoria and Christopher's destruction was now just another chapter in his rising legend, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and prison yards alike. Chapter 9. The Triumph. The television screens throughout Mark Thompson's corporate headquarters played the prime-time documentary about his foundation's work in preventing financial fraud. The camera panned across his imposing figure as he addressed a packed auditorium of business leaders and policymakers. We transform personal tragedy into public protection, his recorded voice carried through the office speakers. Each prevented fraud, each exposed scheme, strengthens our society's defenses against manipulation and betrayal. Rachel paused the playback, turning to Mark in his executive office. The network reports record viewership. Your message resonated particularly well with business and financial sectors. Public opinion creates opportunity. Mark signed the last document on his desk. Approval for the foundation's expansion into 3 new states. What's the status on the legislative package? The state committee has scheduled your testimony for next week. They're calling it the Thompson Protection Act. Rachel's promotion to chief of staff had proven well-deserved. Early support suggests it will pass with minimal opposition. In the state capitol building, politicians and legal experts gathered to hear Mark's testimony about financial manipulation and emotional abuse. His commanding presence drew all eyes as he approached the podium. Distinguished committee members, he began, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience and professional authority. We stand at a crucial junction. The legislation before you isn't just about protecting assets. It's about preventing predators from destroying lives through calculated deception. The committee chairman leaned forward. Mr. Thompson, your foundation's research has been instrumental in shaping this legislation. Could you elaborate on the patterns of manipulation you've identified? Mark's testimony wove together statistical analysis and compelling narratives, each example a carefully chosen reminder of how thoroughly he'd exposed and destroyed Victoria and Christopher's schemes. In the audience, Amanda Collins watched with practiced admiration. Their relationship had evolved into a partnership of equals, each recognizing in the other a shared appreciation for power and control. The numbers are clear, Mark continued, gesturing to the presentation screens. Financial manipulation costs our society billions annually. But the true cost, the destruction of trust, the shattering of lives, cannot be measured in mere dollars. The legislation passed with overwhelming support, adding another victory to Mark's growing legacy. Media coverage praised his transformation from victim to advocate, though those who knew him understood advocacy was simply another tool in his arsenal of power. At their engagement celebration weeks later, Amanda stood beside Mark as they greeted the city's elite. Her diamond ring caught the light, a symbol not of romantic sentiment, but of strategic alliance. Mark, a senior partner from a prestigious law firm, approached, champagne in hand. The Asian markets are buzzing about your international expansion. Quite a triumph after everything that happened. Success requires clear vision, Mark replied, his arm around Amanda's waist more possessive than affectionate. And consistent consequences for those who oppose it. The Foundation's annual awards ceremony drew national attention. The first recipient, a young woman who'd exposed a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, accepted her award with tears in her eyes. Mr. Thompson's foundation gave me the courage to fight back, she told the assembled crowd. He showed me that victims don't have to remain victims. They can become forces for justice. Mark's speech was brief, each word reinforcing his reputation for turning personal vengeance into public virtue. The audience included several of Victoria's former friends, now eager to align themselves with his rising influence. In his private office later that night, Mark reviewed the latest reports on his expanding empire. The Foundation's success had opened doors to international partnerships, each new alliance extending his influence across borders. Sir, Rachel interrupted with a priority update. The Asian Consortium has agreed to your terms. They were particularly impressed by your handling of internal threats. Mark allowed himself a small smile. The destruction of Victoria and Christopher's schemes had become a selling point in international negotiations, a demonstration of his absolute commitment to destroying those who betrayed him. The wedding preparations reflected Mark and Amanda's shared appreciation for power dynamics. Each detail was chosen to remind guests of their combined influence, their union a merger of strength rather than a celebration of sentiment. During the ceremony, Emily sat in the front row, her child healthy thanks to Mark's continued support. Her public reconciliation with him had secured her position in their social circle while permanently severing ties with her imprisoned sister. Victoria's latest mandatory counseling session coincided with media coverage of Mark's wedding. The prison television showed clips of the society event, each image a reminder of the world she'd lost through her betrayal. Your brother-in-law's wedding is quite the talk, her counselor observed. How does that make you feel? Victoria stared at the screen, watching Mark and Amanda exchange vows. He won. Completely. The rest is just epilogue. Christopher, watching the same coverage in his prison common room, turned away as inmates whispered about the man who destroyed him. His release date loomed, but he knew there would be no fresh start. Mark Thompson had made sure of that. The Foundation's international launch drew dignitaries and business leaders from across the globe. Mark's keynote address emphasized the universal nature of betrayal and the necessity of absolute consequences. In business, as in life, he told the assembled power brokers, trust must be absolute and betrayal must be met with total response. There can be no middle ground, no compromise with deception. Late that night, in their penthouse suite, Mark and Amanda discussed their next moves. She'd proven herself a worthy partner, her social manipulation complementing his strategic brutality. The European markets are nervous about our expansion, she noted, studying market reports. They've heard stories about how you handle opposition. Good. Mark's voice carried the same cold authority that had reduced Victoria and Christopher to cautionary tales. Fear is more reliable than friendship. The city lights spread out below their window, each glowing point representing another potential conquest in their expanding empire. Mark's transformation from betrayed husband to international power broker was complete, built on the foundation of his absolute destruction of those who'd crossed him. His phone buzzed with updates about Victoria's latest failed appeal, Christopher's mounting post-release debts, and the Foundation's growing influence in shaping international financial policy. Each notification reinforced his legacy of uncompromising retribution. To the future, Amanda raised her glass, a predator's smile playing at her lips. Mark matched her toast, his empire secure in its foundation of fear and his reputation for ruthless reprisal now legendary in global business circles. Victoria and Christopher's destruction had been just the beginning, a demonstration of what happened to those who dared to betray Mark Thompson. The night wrapped around their penthouse like a cloak of power, the city below bowing to their combined influence. In boardrooms and back rooms across the globe, people whispered about the man who turned personal vengeance into an empire, who transformed betrayal into triumph. Mark Thompson stood at his window, master of a domain built on the ruins of those who'd underestimated him. His victory wasn't just complete, it was eternal, written in the fearful whispers of those who learned too late that crossing him meant total destruction. The game had evolved beyond mere revenge into something grander, but the core lesson remained. Mark Thompson didn't just defeat his enemies. He erased them from existence, leaving only cautionary tales in their wake. Epilogue. 10 years later, Mark Thompson gazed out from his private jet's window as it descended toward Hong Kong International Airport. At 52, his hair had touches of distinguished gray at the temples, but his presence remained as intimidating as ever. The past decade had transformed his revenge against Victoria into a global empire of influence and power. Sir, his new assistant, Rachel, had been promoted to COO 5 years ago, handed him a tablet displaying market projections. The Asian consortium is ready to sign. This acquisition will make Thomson International the largest financial security firm in the Eastern Hemisphere. Mark reviewed the numbers with the same cold precision that had characterized his destruction of Victoria and Christopher years ago. Status report on our other interests? The Thomson Protection Act has been adopted by 38 states now. The Foundation's international branches have prevented an estimated $12 billion in fraud last year alone. The assistant pulled up another screen. And the Prison Outreach Program continues to use Mrs. Victoria Thompson's case as their primary teaching example. Victoria remained in prison, her multiple appeals denied through Mark's subtle but persistent influence. Her mandatory rehabilitation sessions had become case studies in the psychology of betrayal, her story taught in criminal justice courses as an example of sophisticated financial fraud. The latest report from the prison psychiatrist sat in Mark's encrypted files. Subject continues to exhibit acceptance of her circumstances, understanding that her current situation is the direct result of her choices. Regular attempts to contact Mr. Thompson have ceased as of last year, suggesting final acceptance of the permanence of her position. Christopher Hayes had fared even worse after his release. The Taiwanese investors Mark had quietly tipped off about Hayes' hidden assets had pursued their debts relentlessly. Now Hayes worked as a night janitor in a small Nevada town, his attempts to rebuild his life thwarted at every turn by Mark's invisible but persistent influence. Sarah Mitchell, now global head of security for Thomson International, maintained discreet surveillance on both Victoria and Christopher. Her quarterly reports ensured they remained contained, their stories serving as perpetual warnings to others who might consider crossing Mark Thompson. Mr. Thompson? The assistant interrupted his thoughts. Amanda is hosting the foundation's annual gala in Singapore next week. The guest list includes 3 heads of state and multiple Fortune 500 CEOs. Mark and Amanda's marriage had evolved into a powerful partnership. She'd proven herself a master of social manipulation, extending their influence through charity work and diplomatic connections, while Mark handled the brutal realities of international business. Their twin daughters, now 8 years old, were being groomed to inherit this empire of power. Mark had ensured they understood the Thompson family legacy, not just wealth and influence, but the absolute necessity of destroying those who demonstrated disloyalty. David Chun, now president of Thomson International's Asia-Pacific operations, waited as Mark's jet touched down. The years had strengthened their partnership, built on David's unwavering loyalty during the Victoria crisis. The numbers exceeded projections, David reported as they walked to the waiting limousine. Your reputation continues to open doors. The Chinese officials were particularly impressed by how you handled the attempted corporate espionage last year. That incident had reinforced Mark's legendary status. A mid-level executive had attempted to sell company secrets to competitors. Within months, the man had lost his job, his assets, his family, and finally his freedom. The message remained consistent. Betrayal of Mark Thompson carried consequences that destroyed not just careers, but entire lives. Rachel's voice came through on the car's secure line. Sir, Emily's daughter just received early acceptance to Harvard Medical School. The Thompson Foundation Scholarship has been arranged as discussed. Emily's loyalty during Victoria's downfall had been rewarded consistently over the years. Her daughter's success served as a visible reminder of the benefits of choosing the right side. The contrast with her imprisoned sister strengthened Mark's narrative of consequences. The limousine pulled up to Thompson Tower, the company's Asian headquarters. The building's imposing architecture reflected Mark's philosophy, modern, uncompromising, and designed to intimidate. The documentary crew is set up in the main conference room, the assistant noted. They're doing a 10-year retrospective on the Thompson Protection Act and its global impact. The documentaries, books, and business school case studies about Mark's transformation from betrayed husband to international power broker had created a mythology around him. Each retelling of Victoria and Christopher's destruction served to reinforce his reputation for absolute retribution. In the executive suite, Amanda waited with their daughters. Her social skills had proven invaluable in crafting Mark's public image as a champion of financial security while maintaining his fearsome reputation in business circles. Darling, she kissed his cheek with practiced affection. The girls have news from school. The twins, Sophia and Alexandra, stood with perfect posture, their private school uniforms immaculate. They'd inherited their father's calculating intelligence and their mother's social grace. Sophia caught someone cheating on an exam. Alexandra reported with their mother's diplomatic smile. She gathered evidence and presented it to the administration. The girl was expelled. Mark nodded with approval. His daughters understood the family principles: gather evidence, build an ironclad case, then strike with absolute force. The afternoon's meetings demonstrated how thoroughly Mark had transformed his personal vendetta into global influence. Corporate leaders and government officials sought his partnership, each aware of the consequences of earning his displeasure. The Malaysian contract is ready for signing. David presented the documents. Their investigation into Hayes' old gambling contacts proved very motivating. Mark had maintained subtle pressure on Christopher through various channels over the years. Each time Hayes showed signs of recovering, another piece of his past would surface. Another old debt would find him. The evening news played quietly in the office corner. The Thompson Foundation announced another expansion of its fraud prevention program today. The initiative, born from Mark Thompson's personal experience with betrayal, has revolutionized financial security worldwide. Sarah's secure channel activated. Sir, Victoria's latest counselor submitted her report. She continues to use your name as a benchmark for absolute power and consequence. The prison psychiatrist had documented Victoria's evolution from denial to acceptance, her gradual understanding that her destruction had been not just complete, but eternal. Her cautionary tale was now taught in the Foundation's training programs. The girl's security detail confirms Hayes was spotted near his usual diner, Sarah continued. Still working night shifts, still barely making rent. The Taiwanese investor's lawyers filed another lien last week. Mark's revenge had extended beyond mere punishment into a perpetual state of controlled destruction. Victoria and Christopher served as living examples of his power, their continued existence carefully managed to maximize their deterrent value. Late that night, in his Hong Kong penthouse, Mark reviewed the daily reports from his global empire. Amanda organized their social calendar, each event designed to reinforce their influence. The Prime Minister has requested a private meeting, she noted. His banking system is facing some irregularities he'd prefer to handle quietly. Their partnership had proven remarkably effective. Amanda understood Mark's need for absolute control, his requirement that any betrayal be met with total destruction. She'd helped transform that personal philosophy into an international brand. Rachel's nightly briefing arrived encrypted. Victoria's prison work program application was denied again. Hayes missed another rent payment. Emily's daughter's medical research received another grant. The Foundation's European expansion remains ahead of schedule. Each detail represented another thread in Mark's web of power and consequence. Victoria's imprisonment, Christopher's perpetual struggle, Emily's success, all carefully maintained to demonstrate the price of betrayal and the rewards of loyalty. The twins' private tutor had reported their progress in learning the family business. Sophia showed particular aptitude for strategic thinking, while Alexandra excelled at manipulating social dynamics. They would inherit not just Mark's wealth, but his understanding of power and retribution. A message from David included surveillance photos of Christopher's current life, the small apartment, the used car, the night shift uniform. Hayes had aged badly, his once charming features now haunted by decades of controlled destruction. The Foundation's legal team submitted their quarterly review. The Thompson Protection Act had spawned similar legislation globally, each new law extending Mark's influence while reminding the world of his origin story. Sarah's final report for the night included an interesting detail. Victoria had stopped writing her daily letters to Mark, ending a decade-long ritual of unanswered correspondence. The prison psychiatrist suggested this represented her final acceptance of defeat. "Your father would be impressed," Amanda observed, joining him at the window. "You've turned personal revenge into a global legacy." Mark's father had taught him the importance of absolute response to betrayal, but even he couldn't have imagined how thoroughly his son would implement that lesson. The Thompson name now represented not just wealth, but the certainty of consequence. The next generation of business leaders studied Mark's methodology, learning how he'd transformed betrayal into empire. Victoria and Christopher's destruction had become a Harvard Business School case study in comprehensive consequence management. Their daughters slept in their carefully secured rooms, their dreams undoubtedly filled with the lessons they'd absorbed about power and loyalty. They would carry Mark's legacy forward, ensuring the Thompson name remained synonymous with absolute retribution. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate the consequences of crossing Mark Thompson. Victoria would wake in her prison cell, Christopher would drag himself to another night shift, and the world would continue to whisper about the man who turned personal vengeance into global power. Mark allowed himself a small smile as Hong Kong's lights glittered below. His revenge had transcended mere punishment to become legend, his name now representing an immutable law of consequence. Betray Mark Thompson, and your destruction would be not just complete, but eternal. The empire he'd built on the ashes of Victoria's betrayal now spanned continents. Its influence felt in boardrooms and back rooms worldwide. Each new victory, each expansion of power served to reinforce the lesson taught by Victoria and Christopher's downfall. The night stretched out before him, full of potential for further conquest. Mark Thompson had transformed himself from betrayed husband to global power broker, his personal vendetta becoming a dynasty built on the absolute certainty of retribution. The legacy would continue through his daughters, through his foundation, through the laws and policies he'd shaped. Long after Victoria and Christopher were forgotten, the world would remember the price of betraying Mark Thompson, a price that demanded not just defeat but total, perpetual destruction. And somewhere in a Nevada desert, Christopher Hayes clocked in for another night shift. His expensive suits replaced by janitor's coveralls, his charming smile long since faded to defeated acceptance. While in her prison cell, Victoria Thompson lay awake, finally understanding that her destruction had never been about punishment. It had been about creating a legend of absolute power and consequence. The Thompson legacy of power would endure, built on the fundamental truth Mark had taught the world. Cross him, and your destruction would be not just complete, but eternal. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.